Hello and welcome to African Voices platform. My name is Chiwe Chihana. This week, Somaliland returned to the center of international attention after Israel formally recognized it as an independent and sovereign state on the 26th of December 2025, becoming the very first United Nations member state to do so since Somaliland declared independence from Somalia in 1991. The announcement, which was confirmed by Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and described by Somaliland's leadership as historic. In the UK, figures such as Nigel Farage have also welcomed the move, arguing that Somaliland's stability, regular elections, and record of self-government merit international recognition. But the response has been far from universal. The African Union has reiterated its rejection of any recognition of Somaliland, citing Somalia's territorial integrity and warning that such a move risks setting dangerous precedents across the continent. Similarly, at the United Nations Security Council, emergency discussions have focused on regional stability, sovereignty, and wider geopolitical consequences of Israel's decisions. Tonight, I'll be speaking to Adam Yusuf, who is a Somalilander based in Sheffield and a strong advocate for Somaliland's recognition. We're going to explore what this moment really represents, what recognition changes, and what it risks, and how Somalilanders would navigate global power whilst holding on to their values. Adam, welcome to African Voices platform yet again.
Thank you very much, Chiwe. Really appreciate it.
It's lovely to have you back on the show, and definitely under different circumstances. We are talking about Somaliland's recognition by Israel at a time when, at one of the most polarizing times, Adam, amid Israel's war in Gaza. So I thought we could talk a little bit more about that. But let's start from the basics. Take us back from the headlines for a moment. Why does international recognition matter so deeply for many Somalilanders after more than 3 decades?
Thank you very much for inviting me to the African Voices. And straight to the answer to the question, Somaliland, as you articulated, since 1991, has been seeking international recognition.
Yeah.
Somaliland has been very peaceful for the last 35 years, and we've had peaceful election. The current president has only been in power since December last year, so almost 1 year. And I think it was one of his pledges when he was campaigning for presidency, that once he becomes the president, he will work at his level best to seek international recognition. So what happened December last year, he became a president, and then he was fulfilling one of his commitments, the pledges that is given to the Somalilanders, which is seeking international recognition. So he wrote to about 45 head of states internationally, and hence the Israeli prime minister was the first to respond. The others haven't responded. And that's why, based on that and the historical context, and I think there's a lot of euphoria. What people don't realize is back in 26 of June 1960, when the UK, Britain gave international recognition to Somaliland, the first country that was to support Somaliland on 26 of June 1960 was Israel, and 35 other international countries. So we have a historical links going back in those days, and hence, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for foregrounding this. Now, beyond just the symbolism of sovereignty, right? What, if anything, changes in practical terms for ordinary Somalilanders following Israel's current recognition? And what should people really expect?
Well, I think what we expect is a number of other countries will follow in the next 1 week, which we expect. So that is an expectation. But I think on the ground, what will change is that it will give us a lot of, for example, companies cannot invest in Somaliland. The reason being insurance, international recognition, bilateral agreements. These are important factors of a statehood. And otherwise, you just become another autonomous region, and everything we have to go through Somalia. And we feel we're two different countries that joined together. And 26th of June 1960, Britain gave us our independence. And in the south, Mogadishu was given on the 1st of July by the Italians. So there was a union formed where we Somalilanders joined that union on a voluntary basis. So that voluntary union never worked. Most of the resources was concentrated in the south, and therefore we decided to regain our independence in 91. So I think what it will give us, it will give us a lot of leverage, scholarships, bilateral agreements. And when you're talking to other governments, you'll be on the equal footing, you'll have diplomatic relationship. So all those are important factors,
So
which
those are
we
things
lacked
that you
by
you
not being ready.
expect. Those are things you're expecting to be
Yes.
happening. All right, I see. So that would be exclusively with Israel in the
Yes,
current
for
context. That is,
well, in the current context, the answer is yes. Already they pledged 1 billion in the agriculture sector and water sector, which are most critical, important. I mean, we have huge land underdeveloped, and therefore, if they invested that kind of money, it will really create jobs, bring food, and we have ports. We could import, export, and therefore, I think it will give us a lot of an investment, and hence, uh, it will really change the quality of the life, of the well-being of the Somalilanders.
right. Adam, I need to ask you this. So Israel is the first UN member state to recognize Somaliland, of course, amidst the UN opposing that. But why do you think Israel moved first, and why now at this particular moment in global politics?
I think in terms of global politics and geopolitics, Somaliland is the most strategic located and location on the Red Sea. This is the maritime where all the international vessels, ships, goods and services go through. And therefore, by positioning, most of the world powers are there in Djibouti next door. The Americans, the Europeans, the Russians, the Iranians, they all have military bases on the Red Sea in Djibouti. And therefore,
Can I just pause you there? So are you thinking that the next move for Israel is that they would have a military base in Somaliland?
well, that is on the table and a
Been
discussion,
tabled
yeah,
already.
on the table. And therefore, the question is why Israel have seen this opportunity. I think
Yeah.
it's a both ways. Somalia sees an opportunity of being internationally recognized because Israel is a very developed country, technologically very advanced, and they could invest in a lot of sectors, mining sector, energy sector. But on the Israel part, they see a strategic positioning themselves on the Red Sea. They're missing in that part of the world, and therefore they think if all the other big powers are on the Red Sea, why miss out? So for them, it's a strategically located. It's a strategic move for them, and we understand that.
Right. Okay. So I'm hearing a lot
And we are
more
willing,
strength.
as Somalilanders,
Mm.
sorry, as Somalilanders, we are willing to negotiate with any country that engages with us. And therefore, we're not naive in the sense we understand they have a particular interest on the Red Sea. And therefore, we also have an interest. And that is for the discussion on a negotiation between the two parties.
Okay, so I've heard you. I think what I'm hearing more of, in my perspective, and maybe you could clarify this a little bit more, is I'm hearing more of a stronger advantage for Israel over an advantage for Somaliland. But every diplomatic move has got two sides. You've tapped a little bit into the sort of collaborations on the education and agriculture sector. But genuinely speaking, what does Somaliland stand to gain from that recognition,
Well,
just as importantly?
I think what Somaliland and gains, number one, uh, Israel has a lot of allies
Mhm.
and very strong allies in the West, and they're able to leverage that. But equally, we were very fragile before a week ago. If Israel didn't recognize Somaliland, we were being undermined by our immediate neighbors, Ethiopia and Djibouti. And on the border between Djibouti and Ethiopia,
Right, okay.
there is another port access to Red Sea, which is in Somalia. It's called Somalia. And Ethiopian wanted to have that and Djibouti expansion of land. So they were destabilizing us, already giving arms and money to within some tribes within Somaliland. So as a developing country, we were almost going to be destabilized by our neighbors. By Israel coming in, I think it will give us more leverage and therefore an ally that we can, lean to for support.
Okay, thank you, Adam. It can't be ignored that there has been moral tension and public unease. There is a moral tension here. The recognition itself has come during Israel's war in Gaza, and there are many Somalilanders who have historically expressed solidarity with the Palestinian people, and the broader Muslim community has done that. I think Somaliland's population is at least 90%, 95 and above percentage Muslim. Do you understand why some few people are feeling conflicted or uneasy about celebrating this particular moment?
Absolutely. I think, as you say, Somalilanders are almost 100% Muslim, all supporting Palestinian, very, very strong supporters of the Palestinian cause. But what you have to understand is in the world of politics, a lot of things, and I think what you stand for sometimes the politicians look at the interest in the wider sense. And therefore, I think there has been an outrage, and a lot of people didn't expect this. But having said that, on the other hand, if you're a Somalilander born in Somaliland, if you're born in Somaliland, 1991, and today you are 35 years old in Somaliland, who doesn't see any future, any way out of the quagmire we find ourselves in, also you have to put yourself in that aspect. As a young person growing up in Somaliland, have no job prospects, have no better education, have no better health, completely because you are not internationally recognized. That really puts you in a difficult position. But again, Israel coming out the first country, it is controversial. We understand it, and it puts us in a very, very difficult position where morally, how do we justify, Palestinians and don't have the same independence that the Israeli wanted for Somaliland? So it is a very challenging times, very difficult. But I'm just a community activist. I think I will leave that for the politicians to answer. It puts us in a very
Well,
difficult position.
thanks.
Having said it,
Uh, yeah, no, but thank you for saying that. So maybe the question I should ask you is if you were able to advise Somaliland's leadership, right, as the community advocate you've just described yourself as, if you were able to advise Somaliland's leadership and its critics at the same time, both ways, what would you urge each side to understand about the other right now as things are? Because tensions are quite high, and also even people who empathize with Somalilanders are also torn in different directions.
this stand, I think it's due to ignorance. Because what you see in the media is Israel recognizing Somaliland, thinking they're just taking advantage of us. But when you are from
Mm,
Somaliland, there is a different perspective. You have to understand 35 years of just being in a stalemate, not going anywhere, just praising, saying you have done good elections, well done. But
mm,
beyond that, it's a poor country that has got poor health education, poor education, job prospects for young people.
mm,
70% of Somaliland's population are young people, 70%, less
right.
than age of 35. So if you have
Mm,
a country that the population 75% are young, unemployed, no prospects, as a
mm,
leader of that country, you have to do everything possible to try and get that country out of that paralysis, and therefore, and look for a pathway that can, and we have a lot of an energy sector. We have a lot of minerals, critical minerals. We have an oil which has been explored and proven. All this needs require investment, and therefore, the countries who are criticizing us, the GCC, who are very wealthy Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states,
so the Gulf states,
who,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah, who are next door to us, who we share the same religion for, and who we share a lot of culture similarities. They have all this huge wealth. Only UAE was able to invest 450 million in the port of Berbera.
But they're not forming allyship, strong allyship and bilateral relations with
If
Israel,
they
are they?
invested 2% of their wealth in Somaliland, that
Mm,
could have, we wouldn't have needed the Israel recognition. That could have lived, the population out of poverty, create jobs. And in fact, the UAE, to praise them, they have invested 450 million on our port and built it to a state of art, created jobs. But port was just one small aspect of the bigger picture. And therefore, the same countries who are criticizing us are very wealthy countries.
mm,
They could have spent some of their resources in Somaliland, and hence we wouldn't have taken this route. But
mm.
given the paralysis we were in, we had little choice I think the leadership had little choice.
Right. Adam, just closer to home here in Sheffield. Sheffield, I think, was one of the first councils that had, on paper, recognized Somaliland as a state. And today, Sheffield Central MP Abtisam has, I mean, as a member of the Labour Party, has issued a statement that probably would raise some I wouldn't call it tensions, but would be concerning to somebody like you who is at the helm. Could you talk us through a little bit of that and what has transpired?
Well, what has transpired is there was a United Nations Security Council meeting Monday
Yeah.
evening, which Israel took to the UN Security, and there was a debate. And Israel supported the Somaliland. The American took a position that Israel has the right to and engage with any country it sees fit because it's an independent sovereign country. That's the position the US took. But the UK took a position where they said they respect the Somaliland's sovereignty and therefore they don't and support the Somaliland recognition. And we were surprised. The Labour Party, which majority of the Somali community have been supporting, even myself and many members of our community for the last year when they were in the opposition,
Mm-hmm.
there is what is known as APPG, All Parliamentary Group, which
Yeah, all
consists
party
about 10,
parliamentary group on Somaliland. Yeah.
yeah, on Somaliland. It consists about 10 or 15 Labour Party MPs and about 10, 15 Conservative. It's a cross-party political support for Somaliland. They've just written a report in June 2025, which Ibtisam was also a contributor, and the members of the community all across UK contributed. It was presented to the Parliament in June 2025 this year. And that report, the title was A Roadmap to Somaliland Recognition.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, there was at that point still a lot of support from the current government and across party and a political spectrum on Somaliland matters because UK or Britain historically knows the Somaliland matter much more than any country in the world because they gave us 26th of June 1960 the first recognition, independence. And therefore, it was a slap on the face, the same Labour Party now in government turning their back on Somaliland.
But
And
do you
I,
think maybe it's because of the genocide at the moment and that maybe there's a moral or political point at which recognition becomes too expensive? Could it be that?
well, if the argument is because of the genocide, there's a number of, first of all, the Labour Party was very supportive of the Palestinian plight and issues even before they came into power. Because I used to attend a lot of the rally, and you have the
Mm.
Labour Friends of Palestinians. And there was a lot of red lines during the war in Gaza, where the Israel has really crossed the red lines. And the UK government shied away. So if you're talking about genocide, why then in the parliament there was a lot of demonstrations in London, and to the point even the Labour Party, the current government wanted to even stop the was clamping down on the demonstrations. They let it try to limit that, and there was a lot of red lines that the Israeli crossed, and the Labour government were completely, a lip. They completely didn't want to talk, challenge those issues. So why now?
Yeah, so maybe to just speak to that a little
So
bit.
if the argument is that the Labour government,
Why do you think they haven't though? What are you thinking? If you pose that question, then what are you thinking is the reason? If it's not
but
all these
it
things
just
or these factors.
shows how Israel has Israel is a Israel is a very powerful country, and it's very publicly known that when sometimes they cross the line, I mean the Western world they look the other way. I mean the UK, US completely sometimes are silent, and in a lot of people and eyes sometimes they're seen as complicit, and therefore and I think it's just geopolitics, and I think politicians choose when to challenge issues, when to look the other way. So there's a lot
Okay.
of dynamics.
Okay.
I mean, it's not just one answer for me sitting here just to have the completely,
Yeah.
the answer for all these questions. But I think and I know, and the public know, sometimes governments challenge issues. Sometimes they look the other way. Sometimes they just like to remain silent on particular issues. So again,
Mm.
it just depends on the moment and how they decide to react. But in my personal view,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of red lines crossed, and yet the same government who is saying because of genocide that's why we didn't recognize it. I don't buy that.
Okay, thanks for that input. Can I take it back to where you took it to a very good place when you were talking about the population of young people, and you took it back home to Somaliland, so rather than externally. But what do you think of the decision-making process for decisions like this? Do they require public consultation or debate inside Somaliland, or you're okay with just executive leadership pushing through with that international
I
recognition?
think the overwhelming are supporting it. Of course, there are going to be challenges. There are certain percentage who are not happy, who are saying, well, Israel wasn't the right first country. I mean, in a lot of people, if there was, we expected the UAE to be the first. If that was the case, I'd say the Israel was the second. I think
Mm-hmm.
that could have been a different dynamic. But Israel
Mm-hmm.
being the first, that puts us
Mm-hmm.
in a very, very difficult place to defend. But nevertheless, I mean, watching the news back in Somaliland, the
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming people, because they're the first country to really come out, I think are
Mm-hmm.
supporting both the opposition in Somaliland and the
So
current
anecdotally,
regime
it looks like that.
or the current government,
Um,
and the public at large are supporting it.
but in future, would you like a democratic
Yes,
process for such decisions, or you think this is something that should sit with the executive?
I think it's with the executive because once and when they were doing the election,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in the pledge of each political party in Somaliland, they will do their utmost seeking international recognition. That was the line. How that international recognition comes is matter for the government of the day.
Okay, let's talk about the African Union whilst we're still on the continent, Adam. They have rejected Somaliland's recognition on principle. They're citing Somalia's territorial integrity and warning of dangerous precedents. Is the AU wrong on principle or right on principle, but wrong in Somaliland's case? What are your thoughts as an activist?
You see, they are wrong on the principle because Somaliland is not a successionist as people want to claim it. There was
Mhm.
a report by the African Union in 2005. There was a fact-finding mission, a team of African Union representatives who came to Somaliland by ex-president of Nigeria, I can't remember, Obasanjo. They came to Somaliland and they were given the mandate to look at the Somaliland case. So they went on the ground, spoke to the current government, opposition, civic, and at large the community, and traveled the whole country. So their report concluded, is I think in public domain, 2005 report, African Union, concluded Somaliland had a case, a totally different case. It's not a secessionist. It was a country, 26th of June 1960, given by Britain, and they formed like Gambia, I think in Senegal, and then decided to go back to that union never worked, and they decided to go back and reclaim their independence. So Somaliland case by African Union 2005 report, their own report recommendation is that a Somaliland case is much different to any other African case. And therefore, the recommendation was they should be recognized. So the
Mhm.
same African Union that
Mhm.
having that report and recommendation have not implemented their own independent report. So it is failure from their part, and that information is in the public domain. You can Google that.
So what's thank you, Adam, for feeding into that. But what's the diplomatic way forward in that case? So if the African Union and the United Nations remain opposed, and you positioning Somaliland's uniqueness in the context of whether it's secession, separating, etc., what is the realistic path that should be taken then for from one recognition to broader international legitimacy? Is the strategy bilateral recognitions, like this would be a bilateral one, um, uh, or winning African states first? I mean, that's, I think, in some cases, there's been merit. But what is it that you think is the strategic way to do this diplomatically?
Okay, let me be very blunt on this
Please do.
question.
Please do. Yeah.
Somaliland,
Hmm.
whether the African Union recognizes us or not, whether the
Hmm.
Arab League recognizes us or not,
Hmm.
we control our territory for
Okay.
35 years. We have access to the port in the most strategic located. It's a state-of-the-art port, Berbera.
Hmm.
We can ship in and out of the country goods and services. We have our own airport. We have our own passport, our own currency. We have
Hmm.
managed our own affairs. We have been very peaceful for 35 years.
Yeah.
If we get a very strong ally like Israel, we are just going to go ahead
On a
and
bilateral basis.
bilateral. And therefore, we are confident as Somaliland. We want other countries to, we think almost half a dozen countries will recognize us in the beginning of this new year. Hopefully by the next, in the next
Who are
two.
we talking? I mean, you sound very confident. So give me some names. Who are we talking here?
We expect the UAE.
Mm-hmm.
We expected there is a talk about Greece, and there is a Taiwan, which we already have an excellent relationship. We're one of the best friends to Taiwanese. They have embassy in our city, Hargeisa, and we have embassy in Taipei. They're
Yeah.
already so UAE, Taiwan, Belgium, possibly South Sudan, because they were also a very close ally. Ethiopia, we have excellent relationship with Ethiopia and Kenya. So we have a few African countries and in the Gulf, UAE. So
Yeah.
those countries, we already have some of them representative. We have representative offices of Taiwan, Kenya, Djibouti, Ethiopia, UAE. So we have half a dozen countries who are UK have also representative office in we also and think the UK will come around. So unilaterally we can survive if we have survived for 35 years without any international help. And so we getting these allies on board, I think we will still develop because we have Taiwan who are really supporting us and we have a mutual relationship. And therefore, I think we're just going to go unilaterally. And the same, just I want to give you the other side of the coin. Somalia,
Yeah.
there is an argument Somalia is to maintain Somalia's sovereignty.
Sovereignty, yes,
Somalia,
and integrity.
Mogadishu,
Yeah.
Mogadishu, the capital city of Somalia, the current president cannot even travel within Mogadishu. There's an area called Halane. It's a green zone. Even the Somalia president, Hassan Sheikh, cannot go in his own capital, certain areas within his capital. And you talk about sovereignty. What sovereignty has he got if he even cannot travel in his own capital city? Whereas Somaliland, which is an unrecognized entity, our president can go anywhere. And we don't have any African Union soldiers on or UN soldiers in Somaliland. Everything
Right.
is managed by
But
Somaliland.
we
So
are likely,
we
yeah.
are more independent, more sovereign than the so-called Somalia, which is sovereignty, which African, if the AMISOM leave
No, I do
tomorrow,
think that I think maybe Adam, we're pushing it a little bit by saying it's not sovereign, the so-called. So it's a sovereign state. It is a sovereign state, and
yes.
Somaliland is
But
fighting.
the point I'm
But that's
making,
why you're fighting for similar. You're looking for sovereignty for
yes,
Somaliland. Yeah.
what I'm saying is the current president of Somalia,
Mm.
even his own bodyguards are from AMISOM.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is there's huge AMISOM and in Somalia who are
Mm.
protecting the government offices because of Al-Shabaab. So
When you say
in
that,
terms
when you're
of
talking
peaceful,
about AMISOM for Somalia, I'm just wondering, one of the things that you and I talked about just earlier in this conversation is potentially a military base for Israel. So where are the red lines then for Somaliland in any recognition-based partnership, particularly when it comes to security, military presence, intelligence cooperation, and humanitarian questions? It's just that you've raised that now in relation to Somalia. I'm wondering, is that not what you're also looking for in a country like Israel? And when you're talking about military bases?
you see, the difference is when the UN and the African soldiers were sent there on a mandate to maintain peace,
Mm,
whereas ours, we are already maintaining our maritime. We have navy. As much as we are Americans, we have our own navy, we have our own
right.
army, we have our own police, and therefore we are more independent
So those were
in our domestic
peacekeepers.
affairs.
Yeah, those were
Whereas in
peacekeepers.
Somalia, in terms of domestic affairs, you
Hmm.
have other actors already having that hand in the domestic affairs.
Hmm.
And therefore you are not really independent in it per se, because this AMISOM and the UN soldiers in Somalia are paid by the European Union and the Africa, and even by the US, and the US has just stopped funding them. And that means once they stop funding them, they will have to leave. And therefore, there will be a vacuum. And that vacuum is where the stability comes in, is because you have Al Shabaab and terrorism.
How does
Whereas
that
in
affect
Somalia,
Somaliland?
domestically,
I mean, the proximity.
domestically, we
Hmm.
are managing our own affairs much more independent, hands-on than any other than Somalia. But
And your
what you're
borders
talking
are
about
good.
is the military base. The military base
Hmm.
is based on negotiation, on
Uh-huh.
terms and conditions. For example, our port we gave it to the DP World on a 35 years lease, where they gave us 15%. They will build a port and they will give us 20 or 25% of return on investment, and therefore and create jobs. So there is terms and conditions and negotiation based on the lease of the port of 35 years. So it's a clear, like on a commercial and an entity where you go into negotiation, you know what the agreement and terms and conditions is. It's like Djibouti. Djibouti has all the military bases and in Djibouti, and it's based on terms, 30 years, 50 years. What are the terms? In return, they will train the military. In return, they will pay a fee. So there is a mutual agreement. It's not just one-sided, a very powerful country coming and domination. And therefore, and that happens in every country. I mean, there is a mutual agreement as long as it's a very clear terms and conditions of what kind of an agreement you're going into. And therefore, if Israel...
And you raise a good point. They're not coming there for a peacekeeping mission, I suppose, from
yes,
what they're not coming
yes,
there.
under the pretext, because it's important. When you come under the pretext of peace coming, and funded by the Europeans or by the UN or by the African Union, you come on the pretext that you're coming to maintain peace, and these soldiers are paid by these entities. And therefore, they are also answerable to the countries that who have sent them there. So you lose the autonomy that you control.
Would you, I mean, given where we are currently, we don't know what direction this bilateral relationship agreement with Israel is going to go. But given the Gulf states not being pleased, the African Union and neighboring states as well, would you then, in that case, let's say things escalated, which goodness, God forbid it shouldn't happen, but if things escalated and tensions arose and you had external actors coming into Somaliland, would you accept that kind of peacekeeping, as you will, deal?
You said an important word. The neighboring countries will not be pleased. At the end of the day, it's not pleasing the neighboring country. Every country has their own interest. The same countries will say, oh, we are not happy. We are not there to please them. Ethiopia has its self-interest, who are our neighbors. Djibouti have their own interest when they bring all these bases. They never consult with us. Why should we consult with them? So if I was the president of Somaliland, why would I consult?
It's not. It's probably not
because
pleasing, but
even
it's
when for example, we live in the UK.
It's the concerns maybe that are all often raised when it comes to this, that if this happens in Somaliland, that recognition happens, then that will happen in neighboring entities. It will happen in the rest of the continent. So it's those actors that I'm thinking about as I raise that point.
You see, Chiwe, they should commend Somaliland for maintaining security and stability for 35 years. If Somaliland was infested with Al-Shabaab, that will have huge impact on Ethiopia next door and Djibouti. The fact we've kept it stable and safe, we should be commended for that. And even no piracy on the Somaliland waters at all for the last 35 years. So the European observers and the African observers are aware. And yet we are unrecognized with less resources, but we're able to maintain stability, security, and safety for our citizens as well as the neighboring countries. So for the people who understand the dynamics of the political and situation of Somaliland, they commend us usually by maintaining safe security and stability, because it is to our interest as Somalilanders to maintain that stability for our own sake, but as well as for the neighboring. But if we were in a chaos or infiltrated by Al-Shabaab, that could have destabilized our community, our society, and it will have a huge impact and on neighboring countries such as Ethiopia, which is a 110 million landlocked country, and which again has huge different tribes and a lot of tensions within. So by us maintaining that, I think we should be commended and supported.
So Adam, just before you go, my colleague Bailo has managed to join us, and I'd like Bailo to come on. He's got some questions that we think are important for him to ask.
Adam, it's Bailo here. I know it's nearly done, or you are rushing, but just a quick one. I was wondering, there has been reports of the Somaliland government having behind closed door meetings with the Israelites or the Israeli government. So knowing that Somaliland is a very, very strategic point, and there has been allegations of Israel wanting something from Somaliland for them to play their dirty game. So now that this recognition has come on, is Somaliland ready to play Israel's dirty game or to play along with them to pay for the price of this recognition?
You see, it depends on the context. I mean, in the political terms, I think I don't think they use that word, but having said that, I understand the question is that we are not there to fulfill their policies. For example, there was a talk about, okay, number one, have our president met the Israeli prime minister? The answer is yes. And we even came to know it recently. I think he traveled there and met with him one-to-one prior to this announcement.
And that was not reported, though. That was not reported.
Yeah. But of course, there's a lot of diplomacy. There's a lot of diplomacy issues that never go into the public domain. And that happens in any part of the world. I mean, how many leaders come to London without being in the public domain, and they come meet the prime minister and go back? That happens in the political, I'm not a politician, but it happens in the political world. And therefore, people build that relationship, and then when it becomes formal, it's like having an informal meeting, a formal meeting. And that happens even in the normal, and my community work, you can meet a director of the council informally, but you can still meet them formally. So I think the issue is, are we going to fulfill some of their policy? The answer is no. And there was a lot of rumor that part of this deal, that the Palestinians will be relocated to Somaliland. And the answer, when I speak to the politicians in Somaliland, they said that wasn't on the table, never negotiated, never discussed. It's not something Somaliland is going to accept, to forcefully remove Palestinians from their land to bring them to Somaliland just because we want recognition. I think that was misinformed, and is, according to the Somaliland leaders, it's a propaganda. I think they're trying to throw a lot of things, and they're trying to see what can stick. And what they're saying is, yes, they have discussed international recognition, the support to train the military, to give us technical support, to invest in those sectors and give us the recognition, and use some of their allies to come on board to recognize Somalia. So those issues were discussed. But whether, and the answer to your question, are we going to fulfill some of their very and very controversial policies? The answer is no. We are not there to fulfill as an ally. We're just going to fulfill everything that they are doing, which is beyond some of the international rules. For example, what they're doing to the Palestinians, we don't accept that. Will they forcefully bring people from Palestine to Somalia? And the answer is no. Will we support them on certain issues? The answer is no. I mean, for example, Bailo, you keep on saying that because we are Muslims.
Sorry to interrupt you, Adam.
I mean,
if the answer is no, answer is no, you've mentioned about 3-4 things here that you are saying the answer is no. And you and I know you are very influential in the Somaliland government, which some of the ministers, including the education minister currently, is a friend of yours, is a former work colleague, right? And we've been told, or from my understanding, is that even, there are rumors of Israel currently lobbying for Somaliland in America, in the United States. There are rumors of even the Israeli prime minister attending this recent meeting in the United States is partly to lobby for America to accept Somaliland or to recognize Somaliland, which the US has already categorically made it clear that they're not ready to recognize them yet. But if Israel does everything that you are requiring them to do, that you want them to do you think you are conceding here, or there is a risk or a chance of you also accepting what they will be wanting for you to do, even if it is not now, but in the future?
I think that's the challenge, isn't it? And it's the challenge of the leadership, the people that will be entrusted to be in the leader, to be in that tough negotiation. You're right, he's currently in the US, and we foresee the US possibly in the near future will be recognizing Somaliland because they themselves want to be in Berbera Port. They have some of the high-level military delegation have been to Somaliland and has also been to Somalia and Puntland as well. So that's a public information. It's not just under the radar. It's on the radar. They visited our president, high-level military and personnel from the US. They've been to Puntland, which is next door, and they've been to Somalia. So that is across the board. And yes, Israeli will be lobbying for Somaliland to be recognized. I accept that. But your question is, in the future, will they also want us to support whatever they are doing? The answer is no, but I leave that to the leadership. And it's going to be a challenging one. You're right, because scratch my back, I scratch your back. So give and take. So I see your point.
That's the politician's
I leave that
answer
for the
there,
other
right?
day. But yeah, but on the other hand, I just want to make a very important point. Most of the Arab and Muslim countries, I will name half a dozen, all of them have diplomatic, political, and economic relationship with Israel. And yet they themselves are telling us not to. I'll give you an example. Egypt have rejected, and Turkey. Both of them have diplomatic relationship, political relationship, economic relationship, and they even do the military and what do you call the military and together.
I think Adam, I think what is in contention here is that these relationships you're identifying are pre-current genocide, which is quite contentious. It's the timing, I think, that is really alienating a lot of people from this.
I agree. I think it's the timing before the genocide. Most of these countries are the Gulf states, UAE, are all friends of Israel, and they are working with them. But you can argue, I mean, after the genocide, it becomes a pariah state where everybody is thinking, why now? So it's the timing.
Adam, it's always amazing speaking to you. But finally, for Somalilanders who are watching or listening, who feel uneasy or pleased, what would you say to them directly as you've been on African Voices platform today?
I would say to my fellow Somalilanders, I think continue the good work you're doing, both in the diaspora, for those of us who are in the diaspora like myself and many, many others in the UK, Sweden, Norway, Canada, Australia, Middle East, who are very active. We're well mobilized. We're well, and we advocate for our Somaliland in the diaspora to show the positive aspect of what Somaliland is doing. So continue that support, but also try and win as much friends as possible and try and educate for those who do not know about Somaliland. I think it's due to ignorance. And sometimes when people explain the issues much better, I think it's just raising the awareness and making sure people are well informed and they can make those decisions. But for our sake, I think we will continue to maintain this stability and develop the country and comply with international rules and make sure that we become part of the international community and not just being isolated and live in that paralysis for much longer. And I think what we're doing is for the younger generation to continue with that endeavor.
Thank you very much, Adam. That was Adam Yusuf, who is one of the advocates for the recognition of Somaliland. My name is Chiwe Chihana. This is African Voices Platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.